Navi's run at TI 2011 is a story of nothing but pure dominance. I mean, they only lost one game all tournament. There are a multitude of reasons for this. You could talk about the rise of Dendy. You could talk about the sheer consistency of the rest of the lineup and them arguably having the best player in every role at the event. But one of the most under-discussed things that I believe helped Navi heavily at this tournament was the fact that going into every single game at TI 2011, they had an advantage before they even loaded into the server. Navi's drafting was unbelievable this tournament, and I believe it is the biggest reason that they were able to dominate TI 2011 in the fashion that they did. There are a multitude of factors that go into this draft dominance from Navi. One of the main ones was Puppy's Chen. I mean, we all know Puppy is the Chen guy. He has been the Chen guy since the start of Dota 2. And with a few special cases aside, like X having Tinker banned twice against him in the Scythe series, Puppy is the only player that consistently drew bans on his pocket picks in round one. Navi played 10 games, and Chen was banned against him 5 times, all in round one as well. No other team even came close to the amount of round one bans drawn on a single hero. And by the way, all 5 games that the Chen didn't get banned, Navi picked it and won 4 of them. Essentially every game, it felt like they had one extra ban than their opponent because they would be forced to either ban Chen or just tank it and basically instantly lose. Another major thing that helped Navi was the fact that there were very limited options to scale at this event. Navi's playstyle was very heavy early game. Their ideal strategy was to pick up a Night Stalker on art style and smash the game during the first night cycle and end at around the 30-minute mark. The obvious way to circumvent this is to play scaling. And unfortunately for the teams at the event, the only two viable scaling heroes, for the most part, were Spectre and Anti-Mage. These heroes were the main viable ones because they were incredibly easy to execute in a way that the other options like Faceless Void and Morphling were not. I mean, we all know how Void works. You whiff a chrono at 45 and oh no, the game's over. Anti-Mage and Spectre, if you got to a certain point of the game, were basically a free win at this tournament. And unfortunately, since those were the only two heroes that were viable, and there were 2 bans, Navi could simply just ban those 2 heroes every game and almost get rid of any scaling potential from the enemy team. In every single game but one, Navi would ban Spectre and Anti-Mage. And the one game that they didn't ban Spectre, they still banned Anti-Mage, and then they first picked the Spectre themselves. Navi basically forced every team they played against to either outfight them in the early game or play a more mid-game comp from a pretty large gold deficit. The issue with that was that Navi was so good at snowballing games that it was pretty rare that the mid-game comp would even be online before the game was over. And part of the reason they were able to end the game so quickly is because they played the push comps, which goes into one of the next advantages they had, which was their read on the meta. Navi was one of the early teams, aside from MYM, to pull out the aggressive push comps centered around Nature's Prophet and Chen, and using the jungle to generate pressure and take down towers early. Most of the other teams at the tournament had either just defaulted to some sort of team fight composition or scaling, and as I've already pointed out, obviously scaling was not really a viable strategy against Navi because they just banned you out every game. And the team fight ended up being inferior to the push in the vast majority of times they squared off against each other. eHome, the team that got second place, actually had to adapt to more of a split pressure push composition style mid-tournament, switching from playing heavy team fight to going more towards Weaver, Tinker, and Nature's Prophet by the end of the tournament. A great read on the meta will always really help a team perform well at an event, and Navi had exactly that from the very beginning of this tournament. Not only did they play push comps the entire time, but they also were actually one of the first teams to pick up the Marana, who ended up being one of the highest win rate heroes at the entire event. Havost, in particular, played it all but 2 games of the entire tournament. Navi had played Marana in all 3 of the group stage games, and across the entire stage of the tournament, the other teams had only played her a combined total of 5 times. Murata ended the event being 15-6, with 7 of those wins being Havast. And this leads into one of the final points of what helped Navi's draft be so dominant. The fact that pretty much every player had a hero that you felt like you needed to ban. Artstyle had his Night Stalker, Dendi had his Ancient Apparition, Havast had Marana, and Puppy, of course, had Chen. Arguably, Light of Heaven also was very good on the Nature's Prophet, although it drew less bans and Navi played it a little less often than the other ones. I'll put up all the drafts on screen and we can just look over them. But as you can see here, eHome banned Night Stalker and Ancient Apparition in all 3 games. And in the group stage, Navi was mostly allowed to play the Night Stalker, but once the playoffs hit, it was either picked away from them, in the case of what Moscow 5 did, or it was banned. And the one game it wasn't banned, which was their game 1 against Scythe in the upper bracket final, art style shit on the game. I think he ended like double digit kills and double digit assists, and Navi got something like 10 kills during the first night cycle. It was not close. I think the game was 23 minutes. Now, obviously, eHome having to ban Night Stalker and Ancient Apparition in the grand finals allowed Puppy to play Chen. And this was just the problem with having to play Navi. They had each player with a hero that was essentially, you couldn't let them have it, and there just simply weren't enough bans to deal with it. Because of the 2 bans in round 1, Navi could just pick the other 3. And I mean, the Scythe Gaming series in particular was really funny because they played Night Stalker, Ancient Apparition, Marana, Crystal Maiden, and Enigma, and Scythe banned Chen and Nature's Prophet. In game 2, Scythe banned the Night Stalker instead. Navi would pick the exact same comp, but with a Viper instead of a Night Stalker. And that's just the perfect example of just how hard the team was to draft against. They were willing to stick to their guns no matter what. They knew exactly what they were going to pick going into every draft. And if one of the signature heroes got banned, they would just pick the other ones. And to top it all off, they showed in the grand finals that they had the ability to play everything else all along. Havast went from playing 8 games of Mirana straight to in games 3 and 4 of the grand finals playing Spectre and Weaver, and arguably being the best player of the grand finals playing those heroes. All this to say, there is a reason that Navi dominated TI 2011 so hard. Their draft was unbelievable, along with obviously everything else that people have already talked about ad nauseum. The level of individual play and strategic depth that they brought to the tournament proved them well deserving of taking home the first Aegis in Dota 2's history.